Good evening, Malaysia and followers from around the world. Sexual harassment, bullying, abuses have become talking points as our sports ribbon speaks up, demanding for an end to it. From rape jokes to sexual acts, victims have been encouraged to speak up. National diving champion Dato' Pandelelarion recently spoke up about her unhappy experience involving her former coach. Joining us tonight is former national rhythmic gymnast Sarina Sundara Rajah. She was a gold medalist for the 1998 Commonwealth Games and the 2001 SEA Games. She was also the 2018 Olympic Council of Malaysia Hall of Fame inductee and the 2020 UPM Sports Ambassador. She's the founder and principal coach of Sarina Rhythmic Gymnastics Club, or SREC. We are pleased to have her on board to join this conversation. She's a very experienced person, and of course, she should be able to enlighten us on this subject. Welcome on board, Sarina.
Good evening, ChunWai. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm truly grateful for the platform to speak about creating a safe environment for our athletes. And thank you.
Okay. I just want to start this conversation by asking you, what made you took up this decision to speak up against sexual harassment, abuses, and bullying within the sports fraternity in Malaysia in particular?
Well, sports have shaped the way I am today. And I'm truly grateful for sports, the experiences, the training and competition. And there are many reasons why a child should participate in sports. I mean, sports teach important life lessons, including goal setting, teamwork, resilience, and self-confidence, in addition to the great exercise it provides. Unfortunately, competitive sports can also be a high-risk environment that for misconduct, including physical and sexual abuse. And these types of abuse can have a long-term damaging effects on a child's psychological well-being. And there are far too many stories of athletes facing abuse in sport, particularly sexual harassment and abuse. And these are frightening numbers, and we should all feel an obligation to help and eradicate these abusive practices in sport. If we don't change the structure and the system, and also the culture within the sport ecosystem, it will keep happening. And I realize there are not many people who are championing for women's sports. And being the founding principal of SRGC, I'm responsible for coaching young gymnasts as young as 3 years old. And I have a social responsibility and a moral obligation to ensure that my girls are training in a safe environment.
Sarina, there seems to be a greater awareness and a readiness among the female athletes to speak up compared to the previously. In the US, a lot of them have spoken up, and in the West as well. What made you think that it has come to a point where the young athletes are more prepared to speak up compared to the past?
Well, in the recent years, many athletes, they have come forward with allegations of sexual harassment and abuse. And the realities of abuse are well documented in academic research and media. A prime example being the documentary Athlete A on Netflix. It is the biggest sexual abuse scandal in history and in sports history. And former Team USA gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar was sentenced to, in 2017, to 60 years on child pornography charges. And in addition, he was sentenced to 175 years in 2018 after pleading guilty to 7 counts of criminal sexual conduct. And at the sentencing, which I was following closely the case, 156 victims, mostly female athletes, they spoke, recounting similar stories of how they went to him to receive treatment for sports injuries, only to be sexually assaulted and told as a form of treatment. So in the wake of these cases and the Me Too movement, more athletes and survivors of abuse are speaking up. However, Chunwai, there are far too many silent sufferers.
Yep. When we talk about these violations, can you share with us about the sexual harassment? There's bullying, and there are abusers, and there are favoritism. Obviously, there are different categories. And in the case of Pandela, she was very unhappy with this coach who makes these sexist jokes, and she was not very happy, and she complained, and she felt that she was sidelined and abused by this particular coach. So in your experience in a Malaysian context, these various categories, how does it take effect?
Well, the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, they have recognized abuse, sexual harassment and abuse in many different contexts, including hazing and neglect and sexual harassment and abuse. So in terms of what happened to Pandalela was, I believe there is no, a comprehensive set of a code of conduct that details, okay, what is an appropriate behavior and language between an athlete and a coach. So when these coaches, they use this kind of, sexist and very inappropriate language with their athletes who are under their charges, under the charge, it's extremely unfortunate, and there must be something that can be done. But there is nothing in place. There's no act, there's no law, there's no policies in place to prevent this from happening.
I think that maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago, there was a court case involving a Penang athlete coach who was charged in court. I can't remember what exactly was the outcome. This particular person was accused of massaging, in the pretext of massaging the women athletes. And I spoke to many athletes. My wife was a state runner in Penang. So I had opportunity to speak to various people. So there was always this conflicting views, some said, no, this person cannot be like that, Some others said there were reasons, there was suspicious. And of course, in cases like this, proving it is always the most difficult part. And I think that many athletes do not want to proceed with any official complaint, because the question of proving it is going to be very difficult, especially if there's no physical evidence. What about the reluctance is also because that they fear that they will not be able to progress further in what they want to achieve, because they're indebted to this particular coach when it comes to sports in Malaysia. What's your view of this?
Many athletes, they stay silent for many reasons, and they don't go public until years after the alleged abuse takes place. And many people listening to them wonder, if it was so bad, then why didn't you say something earlier? Or if it actually happened, you wouldn't have stayed silent for so long. The truth is, however, that many people hide their abusive experiences from others. It takes a lot of courage to come forward. And it's one of the most difficult things for a survivor to do, because every survivor who continues to speak out is doing so at the cost of having to relive the experience. And for our athletes, for example, they're fearful of accusing authorities of abuse because of the perceived repercussions. They fear for their athletic careers and their futures in the team. And why? Because fulfillment of their dream and ambitions depend on being selected for training and for higher levels of performance and competitions. So sometimes these fears, they may be exaggerated, but they're often very real. I mean, the fear of being ostracized, the fear of being labeled as a troublemaker, fear of not being selected, fear of losing funding or sponsorship. So I give an example, like athlete A. So gymnast Maggie Nichols from the 2016 Olympic team, she was dropped after reporting Larry Nassar. And she was the first athlete to report his abuse to USA Gymnastics, the national governing body for gymnastics in the US. But instead of taking action, the complaint was buried for a very long time. And then what followed was, a horrific sequence of continued abuse, widespread cover-ups, and alleged retaliation against her for coming forward. And despite being a top contender and finisher at the Olympic trials, she was eventually dropped from the 2016 team. So, I mean, of course, our athletes, they are afraid of speaking out because of these perceived repercussions.
In our Malaysia context, what would be the most common form of abuses?
Common form of abuses. Sexual harassment and abuse, they happen in sports and at all levels, and prevalence appears to be higher in elite sport, especially in high performance environments where athletes are fine-tuned to push themselves to, physical and mental limits. This can actually go unnoticed, and it can be deemed as what it takes to reach the highest level of performance. So the culture of winning and criteria for success have created a cycle that perpetuates abusive practices, portraying them as acceptable, at times necessary in order to achieve success. So this relentless culture leaves our athletes with little choice of, other than to accept and ignore the abuse, to play through the injuries and the pain, and do whatever it takes in pursuit of success. So these ideas are often instilled from a young age. So when children and their families, they gain access to elite expertise, the national team, they know that there are many others are waiting to take their place. So this can encourage compliance, which means continued selection in the systems, means accepting how things are being done. And because success is also so desired, when it's achieved, uncompromised coaching practices in abusive coach-athlete relationships may be reimagined as effective coaching, with success only deemed possible because of those practices.
Do you feel that sometimes that these abuses, this harassment, are sometimes couched behind the term of discipline? That I need to instill this hard discipline on you so that you will excel. Could that have happened? And of course, the athlete would not really know. All these are really unnecessary, but it is sort of like instill on you to say that if you want to succeed, this is the way it is. Sorry, if you are not, no one is forcing you, you can leave. But if you want to reach the top, this is the way it should be. Is that accepted and sort of given in?
That is exactly what is happening now, ChunWai. Because, like I said earlier, there is no comprehensive code of conduct for coaches to engage with their athletes that represents the best practices in sporting activities. So athletes, they don't know what constitutes safety, security, and abuse of self from the physical, mental, and emotional point of view. So it's very important that we educate our athletes to recognize for the precise behaviors that are acceptable and that are not, and to respond to predatory behaviors as it happens can have a lasting impact. So when we do not act immediately, then behavioral implications and problems will start to happen. Yeah. And also one more thing that I would like to highlight is that that there is this parallel idea of a conditioned obedience and respect, which is the inherent practice and mindset of athletes in general. Athletes are thought to listen but not speak, and to be quiet and comply when a coach is, adjusting their movements. So even if they do gain the confidence to speak out, no one really cares. No one listens. They may not be taken seriously, and which leads to feeling betrayed, either by an individual person, by the justice system, or by a society. So in most cases, people who speak out of being abused are regularly condemned and minimized, mocked, or shunned outright. So it's critical that our athletes feel empowered and safe to speak up and also report questionable behaviors when they see it. So athletes will only feel emboldened to speak up if their voices are being heard. So that is what is missing in our ecosystem at this point.
Yeah, that could be worse if your peers gang up against you. The pressure will even be greater. Okay, I'm trying to understand this. If I'm a male doctor, I will always have a female staff or a female nurse in the room if I'm examining a female patient. Okay, now if I'm a male coach, okay, I've got this group of 15, 18 people who are just 15-year-old or who are still not adults under my care. What are the safeguards in the context of Malaysia? Would there always be a female assistant coach or counselor who will be present? Do such things happen in Malaysia?
Based on my personal experience and from what I hear from the athletes who are in the current sporting ecosystem, there are none. There are no safeguards and compliance to this kind of things. I remember when I was seeking treatment for a massage, and I remember I was being rubbed, in an inappropriate manner that, I thought like, oh, wait a minute, this is not right. But then I wasn't trained to act. So I didn't know. It's like, okay, I know my gut feeling was telling me that this is not right, but what can I do? Who do I speak to? And what are the actions that can be taken afterwards to prevent this from happening again? And there's so many things that is running through my mind at that time that by the time I process everything, that that'll be too late. So this kind of things, like you said, when athletes are seeking treatment or when they are, going for a massage, they should have someone in their trusted ecosystem to accompany them. But this is sorely missing from our ecosystem at the moment.
How old were you then?
I started gymnastics when I was 11, and I believe I was around 13, 14 at that time. Yeah. But I have so many other experiences that, I wouldn't want any other child to go through what I've gone through, because it has a lasting impact on, how you function as a human being after sports.
Yeah, there's always this the dilemma. Because you're a child, you're unsure, but your gut feeling tells you that it's not correct. It has gone past it, but you're unsure. And of course, if there's any complaint to be made, I'm sure the coach would deny and say, "Oh, this part of thing, the child is overreacting. She's under pressure." So there will always be such a justification. In other countries, you have mentioned a lot about safeguards. In the interviews that you have been speaking on this issue. When we talk about safeguards, what kind of safeguards in sports are you talking about?
I'm talking about safe sport. So, number one is to improve the safe sport compliance, and through the implementation of a safe sport program, like a comprehensive abuse prevention program consisting of a multi-layered approach to keep athletes safe, which includes required policies and best practice guidelines, mandatory screening, including criminal background checks and employment screening, training and education, monitoring, supervision, and also mandatory reporting. So these are the measures that are in place by a lot of countries, that are among the strongest safeguards found in youth serving organizations.
Are there any countries that we could benchmark ourselves in, and what are the best sport safe practices in these countries? Can you name some?
So recognition of sexual harassment and abuse in sport has come at the highest levels. So I'll give an example of the US Safe Sport Authorization Act of 2017 that established protection for young athletes from sexual abuse. It actually came in response to the recent abuse scandals, including the USA Gymnastics. And this act creates a new standard of care that will affect youth serving organizations across the country. So the purpose of this law is to expand the existing mandated reporting laws to all youth sports organizations that participate in sporting activities. So this has the potential to affect not only the national sports governing bodies, but will also impact all public and private schools, universities, country clubs, fitness centers, community organizations, camps, and sports facilities. So at a minimum, any organization involved in youth sports will likely to be held to an increased standard of care regarding reporting, training, policies and procedures, and periodic safety system reviews. So as a direct result of this act, the US Center for Safe Sport was set up under the auspices of the Safe Sport Authorization Act of 2017. And its primary focus is as to which it has exclusive jurisdiction to review allegations of sexual misconduct and to impose sanctions, sometimes up to a lifetime ban of a person from involvement in all Olympic sports.
You have been advocating these laws. How successful and how far have you managed to push this through in Malaysia?
RealChunWai, it has been a long journey since 2019, since YB Syed Saddiq's term as a sports minister. However, Safe Sport then was very new and not many people heard of it. So it was, a journey of increasing awareness and getting people to talk about it. So hopefully with this new administration, we are able to finally push for a Safe Sport Act before it's too late.
Okay. I think that you should continue to push this with the support of more former athletes and present athletes, because that this is an issue that cuts across all races or all religion. It is a neutral issue, and I think that people will come in to support it much more easier. Now, you would have studied all the cases in the US and so forth with these laws. What about the question of enforcing it? Having laws is one thing, but enforcing it is always a hard issue. How would you suggest such laws be enforced?
But at this moment, if a coach or a higher authority member were to do something wrong, okay, towards something harmful to an athlete, there is no law that can help that. There's no enforcement. So that's why it's important to push for the Safe Sport Act, because the current laws for children does not expand to the sports community. So it's very important that we have this in place, because no matter how many policies and guidelines and procedures that we have now, yes, it can help to minimize the risk of abuse to a certain extent, but on the full extent of enforcing it and making sure that these perpetrators are they are being charged and sentenced, that's very rare.
Mm-hmm. Sarina, you mentioned about earlier. You mentioned about the culture. A lot of things still starts from the home and in our schools.
Mm-hmm.
The first one, of course, is a reference to older person and someone with authority. In this case, is the coach or the manager. In our Asian culture, the reference is so deep and so great. Sometimes it is almost on the verge of something or being ridiculous. Okay. That this person can do no wrong. So something makes us difficult to respect is one thing, reference one thing, but sometimes it goes overboard because the coach or the manager will just abuses and says that no one no one can question me, and they are always right. So there's also this question of the second factor, where especially Malaysians, that many of us are reluctant to speak up. We are afraid of being laughed at, being mocked at. When you give talks, when they ask, are there any questions? Nobody put up their hand. When the conference is over, everybody rush to you and ask you questions. Then it's almost becoming a norm. We want people, and of course now many young people speak up, which is really good, and we are seeing this taking effect. And we're telling them that you cannot run away. It's going to hit you at some point or another, because we have learned to speak up, which is a very good culture now. That comes to another point: respect for females, respect for women, which I think is lacking. The older coaches, in the case of Pandela, so this particular person was making bad jokes. She didn't want to take it anymore, and she says no. And of course, she ended up being bullied. There could be other participants who laugh along, hoping to be accepted. We have a serious problem in Malaysia, and in many countries as well, where teachers are able to get away with lousy jokes, bad jokes, and even among peers, among friends of ours, sometimes they think it's funny, but of course, in this modern age, 2021, it's no longer funny. You got to come up with better jokes and better lines. Do you think that at the school, perhaps even at the physical education classes, in civic classes, where this should be inculcated at a very early age, where look, it's no go making bad jokes of females. You got to respect your mom, you got to respect your sister, you got to respect your grandmother and your friends, because that they are females, and that you should respect them. If you crack jokes about other people, that is the same as showing the disrespect to your mom and your grandma. Do you think that it should start at this level, perhaps?
That's a very good point. That's one thing that is that's something that we need to address, because when I coach my girls, they are just so afraid to speak up. So there is this culture of silencing that is instilled, especially with grassroots athletes and also parents. Even parents, they are fearful of speaking up because of the possible repercussions on their children. So, sometimes difficult gymnasts, difficult athletes or parents, they don't get as much attention from coaches, or they get moved to a lower status group in the club, or they don't get coached properly, they're not spoken to, or they're judged unfairly. So when children see these things happening from an early age, especially at a club level, this silence and obedience becomes totally normalized. So changing the culture at the beginning of a child's athletic career will give them the confidence to speak up. And but like you mentioned earlier, like in school, I remember the recent case of Ayn when she spoke out about her teacher. So yes, everyone took notice of that and said, okay, this is wrong and this shouldn't be happening in our education system. However, it is still happening, but there are no enforcements. At the end, today, Ayn is being sued for, speaking up. And so that will actually prevent, other kids to stand up and say, hey, this is also happening to me, because they are fearful. Okay, what's going to happen to me? And what if I don't receive the same support? Then, what's going to happen to my education future? So these are the things that are also preventing, our children from speaking up. And there's also an appeal, to authority as well. That when I train my girls, there is no such thing as Miss Sarina or Coach Sarina who, happens to be their coach, whereby they must listen to me. They call me by my name, Sarina, and I always challenge them to speak up and to always, to argue but to argue nicely in a way that they present, the science, the data, and the logic behind their explanation. So, I try to encourage these kids to speak what's on their mind, because this is important. It has to start from grassroots when they're young. So hopefully schools will also help to promote this kind of culture whereby kids should be empowered to speak up.
Sarina, there's another way of pushing some of the safeguards to come.
Mhm.
For example, I'm not too sure because I'm not a sports person now. To qualify as a coach, for example, as a gymnast coach or as a sports athlete involving females as a coach, I do not know whether there's a requirement for a license or for a qualification or something where it could be built into the contract, or they must attend a certain course to qualify as a Malaysian trainer. Look, one of the modules of the coach must be on handling female athletes in a very sensitive and in a very sensible manner. Is that possible? That so that right from the beginning, if you want to be a coach, you want to be qualified as a coach, you must sit for this module. That look, you have to show this degree of respect on how to handle a female athlete. Is there such a thing in Malaysia?
We have training courses available for different sports, and it's either provided by the National Sports Association, the NSAs, or the Academy Kejurulatihan Kebangsaan, which is under ISN, Institute Sukan Negara. However, I must say that the sports ecosystem is largely unregulated, whereby anyone can become a coach. So this is very scary because we are talking about dealing with young kids. Giving them the wrong foundation is one thing, but also to safeguard, to make sure that these coaches are properly certified and trained in a manner where they know how to engage with athletes who are usually minors. This is lacking. So I know a lot of coaches who are in charge of young athletes who are not properly certified, nor have gone through enough experience. It's like, for example, like if you were studying in medicine, and if you became a doctor, but first you have to actually intern.
Yes.
Yeah. So to gain that experience and level of expertise before you're in charge of your own patients. So that kind of system is, we don't have that in place.
What do you call the person who does this physio or the massage on female, on any athlete, whether it's female or male? What do you call this person?
The masseurs, physiotherapists, we have so many.
Obviously, that it is required that there should be a fellow female athlete or a companion who should be there. I think these are the rules which I think that's missing, because in the past maybe people just take it easy, but we're talking now about you're handling your kids to a particular person, and comparatively in the physique wise, the athlete of today, especially the female athlete, are much more well built. They are much more matured. And sometimes that makes it even a bit risky for them. It is quite different in the build of during our time and now, and obviously they need all the protection. Now, it's going to be a really long haul pushing this. Whether it is from the schools, whether it's of institutions, even even among our peers. Okay, but as you have started the first step, you have started speaking to the ministers, and I think that most of our sports ministers will be quite supportive.
Not yet. I'm still waiting to have a meeting with our current sports minister to discuss about safe sport. So I'm waiting.
You need to have more people on board your campaign.
Yes, that is true. Why? Because it's really fascinating that we expect a lot from our athletes, but then but there is very little that we're doing to ensure their protection. I mean, if these athletes are not protected, how are they ever going to reach peak performance?
Yeah. And
let alone in the pipe dream of achieving an Olympic medal. So we need to think from a broader perspective, a big picture. I mean, we spend so much money on infrastructure. However, we don't spend enough. There's no effort at all given towards protecting our athletes' well-being and health. So there should be more conversations taking place in order to raise more awareness and to have a deep understanding about how their safety and security and well-being can actually contribute to peak performance, and therefore then will lead us to,
Sure.
achieving medals at the global stages. So, yeah.
Sarina, I really hope that you will form more alliances with athletes from overseas, get more personalities involved, become more outspoken, and to be a pain, okay, to these people. Okay. That's how it works. Okay. Okay. One final word from you on what you really want to see. You have taken these baby steps. We have yet to see the sports minister. I will send a text to him and say, please meet up with Sarina. Okay.
Thank you.
Now, final words from you on what you want to push and what you want Malaysians to do in supporting this cause.
Chunwai, my wish is to have, to push for a Safe Sport Act, a law that establishes a protection for athletes from sexual harassment and abuse. Because while abuse is, is prohibited in Malaysia, there are no laws that that explicitly extend this prohibition to the world of sport. So clear and comprehensive reform is needed to eliminate these abusive practices and protect our children. And although the Malaysian government and sports organizations, they have attempted in recent years to address physical abuse of athletes, child protection guidelines that apply to sports organizations to date have been non-binding suggestions with no clear mechanism for ensuring compliance. So hence the Safe Sport Act, the need for action is urgent and pressing. And I believe Malaysia can lead and should lead the global movement for reforms to protect our children and athletes in sport.
Thank you, Sarina. To all Malaysians and followers from around the world who are watching this program, Sarina has spoken up, Pandadela has spoken up. Please do not let this go in vain. Please continue to support this cause because it's really important. It is not just about athletes, but it's about our kids, our sisters, and our family members. And the hope, and these are the people who have joined sports, taken up sports, dedicated their time and everything for the sake of Malaysia. Let them focus their attention and their energy in sports and not be bogged down by other issues. External pressures, internal pressures of all kinds. Finally, Sarina and I wish to take this occasion to wish all Hindus a happy Deepavali. And Deepavali is the festival of light. We know we have hope and there's light at the end of the tunnel. There will be. And happy Deepavali from Sarina and myself. And please share, like, and press the subscribers button, please. Thank you. Good night. Happy Deepavali.
Bye.